husband was on business trip when I went to the bar and made this mistake which costed me greatly.
I accidentally cheated on my man just after we got our first baby. I have never felt so scared of losing anything in my life. I am afraid my fiancé will leave me and it is all my fault. It was an accident, I can swear it was, but I know how stupid that sounds. I need advice on what to do before I make the wrong move and lose it all. My fiancé, M30, and I, F28, welcomed our baby girl 5 months ago. It was the happiest moment of our lives, and my fiancé's love for me grew even more. Everything is perfect, but I am scared my poor decisions will take it all away from me. I met my fiancé almost 10 years ago at my 18th birthday party. My parents were extremely strict and they never allowed me to go to parties or even throw parties. I lived a very normal life with my parents and my 2 sisters. Ever since I was a little girl, I counted the days to my 18th birthday because I knew turning 18 would give me a little bit of freedom. I had a friend named Anna. She was an only child, so she grew up with a lot of freedom. Anna promised to throw me a birthday party in her house. After a lot of persuasion, my parents gave me permission to go, but on the condition that I took my older sister with me. Anna dressed me up and even lent me her best dress. The party was nothing like I'd ever seen before, but something else caught my eye. My fiancé, Chris, was the center of attention at my own birthday party. I found him extremely confident and attractive, and so did everyone else. I was too shy to say hi to him, but Anna wasn't. After speaking to Chris, Anna told me she had a crush on him. I was surprised because my friend was never one to crush on a guy first. Chris was charming and snobbish at the same time, and these were qualities Anna was drawn to. 2 weeks after my party, I ran into Chris at the grocery store. He recognized me as the birthday girl, and from there, we started talking. I was extremely shy at first because I had no experience with boys, but Chris was warm and friendly, so it was much easier. Soon enough, Anna, Chris, and I became a trio. We did almost everything together. I knew I liked Chris, but I brushed it off because Anna already confessed her feelings for him to me. 1 year later, Chris and Anna started dating, and I decided to give them space because I did not want to be a third wheel. Chris and Anna dated for 1 more year, but something happened. Anna told me she got drunk at a party and cheated on Chris. I kept her secret from him, but Anna cheated on him many times after that. One day, Chris found out and they broke up. Anna blamed me for their breakup and accused me of telling him. I told her that wasn't true, but it fell on deaf ears. That was the end of our friendship. Anna moved out of town with her parents and Chris went to New York to study law. I also got into college soon after that. 4 years later, I graduated from college and moved to New York for work. Coincidentally, I ran into Chris when he came to the boutique I worked in for shopping. I was really shocked to see him, and I could tell he was surprised too. We spent hours catching up and talking about life. It felt like I was in a dream. I could not believe that I ran into my old-time crush. I discovered that Chris was now a lawyer in a very successful firm, name withheld for personal reasons. He was earning 6 figures every month and he was quite popular. Chris was from a rich family and his parents were well-known people. I worked as a fashion designer in a luxury boutique, name withheld, and Chris would always find time to come see me. Months flew by and soon, Chris and I were good friends again. After 1 year of flirting, Chris asked me out and it was an instant yes. Our relationship became pretty serious and we could not spend a day apart. I was the envy of his female colleagues because Chris never hesitated to bring me to his workplace. Life was good and I was living the life I always wanted. A few months later, on my birthday, Chris gave me the sum of $500,000 as my birthday gift. I was so grateful because it was more than enough money for me to start my own boutique. 1 year later, my boutique was already running and I had enough money to build 5 more. Chris was also promoted and we earned more than enough money to take care of ourselves. Chris proposed to me a few weeks after his promotion and I said yes, instantly. I was so excited that I did not resist posting it on my Instagram account. Chris bought a house months later and asked me to move in. My parents wanted us to get married first, but I talked them out of it. I wanted the perfect wedding with Chris, so I did not want to rush it. I already met Chris Pattons by that time and they were nice. They were also against us moving in together without getting married first. Chris told me his family was a very traditional family. Just like my family, they were strict. After a lot of persuasion, his parents did not have a problem with us moving in together. Life with Chris was great and I fell in love with him every single day. He was caring, generous, and extremely loving. He treated me like I was the only woman in the world. Anytime we had disagreements, Chris would never raise his voice or try to snap at me. He was always calm and ready to listen to me first. Chris took care of me when I was sick and would miss work for me sometimes. I cherished every moment with him like it was the last because I never believed I deserved him. Some months later, we decided to have a baby. After weeks of trying, I got pregnant. Chris was overjoyed and I could see the excitement in his eyes when I broke the news to him. He did not let me do anything after that. I had a stress-free pregnancy and it was beautiful. When I gave birth to my daughter, Chris' love for me multiplied. I was insecure about my postpartum body, but it was never a problem for Chris. He took it upon himself to work out with me and get my confidence back. Our daughter was like the icing on the cake because we already had a happy life. She multiplied it for us. I posted a series of pictures and videos of myself with Chris and our daughter in a joint Instagram post with Chris. That was the beginning of my problems. I had just 1,000 followers on Instagram. When I made those posts, I didn't expect it to get as much engagement as it did. Chris was quite popular, but I did not think people would take an interest in his personal life. If only I did not make those posts, I'd not be in this predicament. 3 months after our daughter was born, Chris went on a work trip to Italy. He was not going to be back for 3 weeks. Parting with him for that long was hard for me, but I had no choice. He had to go to work. He already took weeks off work after I gave birth to our daughter. The first week without Chris was depressing and boring. I tried to focus on work and our daughter, but none of it seemed to excite me. I knew it was going to be difficult, but I never expected it to be as depressing as it was. Chris had spoiled me with his presence so much that I was too used to it. Before the work trip, the longest we had stayed apart was 3 days. Chris called me every day, but it was just not enough. I missed and craved everything about him. It was just the first week and it was already feeling like a month. One day, my personal assistant noticed my mood and invited me to a party. I was not used to partying, but she promised it would be a good distraction. I spoke to Chris about it and he encouraged me to go. He did not like the way I looked tired when he video called me. I dropped our daughter off at his mom's house before going to the party that night. I wore a black knee-length gown that was not too revealing. I was not looking for a partner, I already had one I was extremely proud of. I took just 1 drink at the party because I did not want to get drunk. After 2 hours, I was ready to get home and snuggle with my daughter. On my way out, I met a guy named Roy who was just as tall as Chris. He looked so much like my fiancé that I had to do a double take. The only difference was the eyes and face. Chris was also more muscular than him. To my surprise, Roy asked me if I wanted a drink. I politely declined, but then he insisted. I did not like the idea of a stranger buying me a drink, so I tried walking away, but Roy said something that made me stop. He told me he was Chris's friend and Chris asked him to keep me company. I found it weird because Chris had never introduced Roy to me before, but Roy said he was not based in New York. He went as far as telling me some things about Chris. I believed him because Chris was not one to speak to just anyone unless he knew them well. Roy bought me a drink and I made the mistake of drinking it. After another drink, I was dizzy and I had a headache. I told Roy I wanted to go home and he offered to take me home. I dozed off in the car and only woke up when Roy tapped me. He told me I was home already. He guided me out of the car, but I noticed that we were somewhere else. I asked Roy where we were at and he told me his car was faulty and he could not drive it further. I told him I would rather take a cab home and get to my daughter, but Roy said it was already too late for a cab. I thought about it for a while and gave in because I was feeling quite tired and weak. Roy guided me into what I later discovered was his house. I asked him for painkillers for my headache, but he gave me hot milk to drink. That relieved me a little. Roy showed me the room I would be sleeping in, and I thanked him before closing the door. I felt comfortable because I believed he was Chris' friend. I tried calling Chris, but I discovered that my phone was dead. I wanted to take a shower, but had no clothes to change into, so I just laid on the bed and tried to get some sleep. Sometime into the night, Roy knocked on the door. I opened the door and found him standing there in just a towel. He was completely shirtless and his hair was wet. For some reason, he styled his hair just like Chris did. He already had an uncanny resemblance to Chris, but now, it seemed more defined. I asked Roy what he was looking for, and he told me he just wanted to grab his shirt. After grabbing his shirt, he asked me why I had not taken a shower, and I told him I did not have clothes to change into. To my surprise, he offered me his shirt and insisted I wore it. I still felt a little bit dizzy, so I decided to take a hot bath. While I was in the bath, Roy walked in completely naked. I was too stunned to say a word and too tired to move. He just quietly stood there and watched me for a long time. I snapped out of my trance and told him to get out. I kept thinking about Chris and how he would feel if he knew that I saw his friend naked. Roy ignored me, then proceeded to touch himself. He was masturbating in front of me. Imagine how confused I was at that sight. I was drunk, and seeing him do that felt wrong and exciting at the same time. It did not help that I had been sexually starved for over 3 weeks. Chris was extremely busy for 2 weeks before his trip. The temptation was too much, and then I found myself touching myself. It was wrong, I should not have done it, but I could not stop once I started. The worst part was that Roy and Chris looked almost similar. Soon enough, I thought I was looking at my husband touching himself, and then things escalated. Roy got into the tub with me and we had sex. The next morning, after I woke up with a stranger in bed with me, I knew I had made the biggest mistake of my life. My head felt like it was being stabbed with a knife. It was not just a hangover. I found out that Roy had spiked my drink with some sort of cannabis. The most shocking part is that Roy confessed that he was hired by someone to get me to cheat on my husband. He said his job was done and he left me in the house. I had consented. I knew I had consented because I still remember it all. Yes, he left me. That man drugged me, then ran away. I cheated on my husband. I thought I was having sex with my husband because the drug made the similarities between them more defined. I went back home and I felt like a cheat. I could not even look at my daughter because I felt so much guilt. Chris treated me like a queen and I broke his trust. I should not have gone to the party at all. I didn't even have time to think about who hired Roy. I was too depressed to think about myself. It's been a week since I cheated on my husband and a week till he'll be back home. I don't know what to do. I have ignored all his calls because I don't have the courage to hear his voice. I don't even know how I'll face him in a week's time. People of Reddit, I need your advice urgently. It was an accident, but I still cheated. Should I tell him the truth or lie? I cannot live with myself. The guilt is tormenting me. Please tell me what to do. I'm helpless. Update. Hi everyone, it's been 5 months and I wanted to tell you all how it's going. Some of you in the comments called me a fool. I deserve it. Immediately Chris got back, I told him the truth like most of you suggested. I don't think I had ever seen such disappointment and hurt in his eyes. He stared at me for a long time without saying a word. It felt like I had lost all his respect. After some time, he quietly went to his study and locked the door for hours. It was the most tormenting period of my life. I cried out my eyes, but I never knocked on the door. That would have been very selfish of me. He had every right to be angry, so I let him be. I was ready to accept whatever step he wanted to take. Even if he wanted to leave me, I would not hate him. I brought shame upon myself. I was gullible. 2 days after that, Chris forwarded a message to me. In the message, someone sent Chris pictures of me leaving the party with Roy. The person also told Chris what happened. Chris was a lawyer, so he talked to his friends, and they traced the message to Anna. Yes, Anna. Anna hired Roy because she wanted to ruin our relationship. I was so angry that I searched for Roy with the help of Chris, and then he led us to Anna when we threatened to take him to the authorities. When we finally met Anna and demanded answers, she accused me of taking Chris away from her. She felt like I told Chris she cheated years back, so she wanted to pay me back by setting me up. Roy had switched off my phone and Anna was the one who told him personal things about Chris, so I would believe him. Apparently, she had seen all my Instagram posts with Chris and got jealous. There was nothing I could do because I had fallen into her trap. I got home that day feeling defeated, but what was more shocking was that Chris asked for a break. He moved out of the house and we did not speak for 2 months. I lived a miserable life in those 2 months, but my daughter made it better. After 2 months, Chris finally forgave me and he told me he loved me so much he could not lose me. I was shocked, happy and grateful because I never thought he'd come back. We got married 2 months later with our daughter as the little bride. She could hardly walk. My life is back to being beautiful and I have my husband by my side. I hope my story inspires someone and makes them more self-aware. I was lucky to have a husband that was ready to forgive me. Thank you to everyone that commented and advised me to tell my husband the truth. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't.
I never thought I'd run to Reddit for advice, but here I am. I don't know the next step to take right now. My husband found out about my secret affair and then he set a trap for me and my app. My husband Vikram, funny 40, is the definition of an alpha male husband. He's a successful man who likes to be in charge. He never likes to lose control of a situation. So when he found out I was cheating on him, he found a way to make me regret it. And my husband and I, Kamal, 32, have been married for the past 10 years. We have 2 children together, a 5-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy. I know a lot of people will feel the need to judge me for cheating on my husband when I have a complete family, but I have never really felt complete in my marriage. Marriage is supposed to make one feel complete, happy, and content, but I have never really experienced any of these things with my husband. Happiness became a strange feeling to me almost every day. The only light I was fortunate to see was the birth of my 2 children who completed me in a way, but even that too wasn't enough. When my children go to school, I'm welcomed by that feeling of emptiness all over again. It's not helped that the husband I married does not even notice that. He's a perfectionist who's focused on being at the top and keeping his 6 figures constant. I needed more, so I had to search elsewhere. It was a decision that took a lot of courage and self-doubt, but I had to do it for myself. What I never expected was the consequences that followed. I am a mixed woman from Mumbai, India. My mother is from Canada while my father is from India. Growing up with both ethnicities was a little bit of trouble for me. On one hand, I had my strict father who restricted almost all my activities, and on the other hand, I had my strict mother who did not want to restrict my activities just to spite my father. Yes. I practically grew up in a broken home with barely any love and attention. I grew up doing stupid things just to see if my mother would look into my eyes and tell me how much she cared for me. None of that ever happened. My father, he practically ignored my existence every single day. When I was old enough to get married, my father insisted that he would arrange my marriage for me. I did not want that. I just wanted to go to college, a place far away from my parents, then get my freedom and fall in love with a man I actually like. But none of those desires came true. I was to do exactly what my parents wanted me to do. I could not run away. They would have found me. My father worked at an airport. Of course, he had connections. How would I board a flight and not be seen? I had been desperate to get away, but I was not stupid. I ran to my mother for help, but she told me there was nothing she could do. The first and only time my mother was not ready to fight my father was when I needed her to fight him the most. She turned her back on me and did not look back. The first meeting with Vikram and his family was one of the most depressing moments of my life. Even though I knew I was getting into an arranged marriage, I still expected my husband to show me some sort of friendliness. Instead, Vikram was guarded. He did not even try to impress me. Yeah, I was dressed up extravagantly and forced to take etiquette classes so I could make an impression. 2 more meetings later, my marriage with Vikram was finalized. I had no say in it. I could not even choose the color I wanted to wear on my own wedding day. The man I was meant to marry had not even spoken a single word to me before our marriage. Like I felt suffocated because I began to feel like I didn't truly deserve to be happy. I always thought my marriage would make up for all the happiness I lacked as a child. Vikram was good looking and wealthy, but none of that really mattered to me. I wanted to know who he was inside. I wanted to connect with my husband on an emotional level, but Vikram did not look like someone who was ready for that on our wedding day. My parents pulled me to the side and warned me not to do anything to ruin the wedding. They were afraid I'd change my mind and run away. I felt like laughing at that very moment. I thought they wanted to at least hug me and tell me how much they'll miss me. Even if it was a lie, I wanted to hear them say it. None of that happened. All I got was threats and unnecessary talks about being a dutiful wife. After the wedding, I was told that Vikram and I were going to move to Australia. Yes, I was only informed after the marriage. No one told me I'd be moving before the wedding. Maybe they thought it wasn't important since my opinion would not matter anyway. And my wedding was horrible. My wedding night had to be miserable. I was a virgin. Yes, I was a very shy virgin who hadn't even kissed a boy's cheek before. I did not know what to expect that night. So I was a nervous mess. When Vikram and I got to our hotel room, he just turned off the lights and went to sleep. No, I did not feel relieved. I felt stuck. It's not because he did not touch me. I didn't even know anything about sex back then. What hurt me was the fact that the man I married could not even start a conversation with me. I tried talking to him on our way to the hotel that night, but I could just tell that his replies were forced and uninterested. He did not even tell me good night before he laid down on the bed and fell asleep that night. As a girl who was already quite damaged, I felt like I had made the biggest decision of my life by marrying a stranger. Do you know what the worst part was? It was not even my decision at all. My parents chose him for me. When Vikram and I moved to Australia, I tried to start a new life there. Even though I was quite disappointed in the husband I got, I was determined to make our marriage work. I tried starting conversations with him, making jokes, and even disturbing him while he was busy working. So this worked for a while, and he warmed up to me a little. When I say he warmed up, I meant in his own little way. He would answer my questions, laugh at my jokes, and lean into my touches with time. We were friendly enough to start sleeping together. That was how I got my two wonderful children. Vikram and I would have sex 3 times a week or more if we wanted. We'd also talk about random things and joke with each other, but that was it. He was no longer a stranger physically and mentally, but emotionally he was. For many months, I felt like I was greedy for not feeling complete. I felt like he was trying his best to warm up to me, yet I was the one who wasn't satisfied. I actually felt guilty for not being happy. It's something I struggled with internally for a long time. I actually began to hate myself because I was a housewife who just stayed home and awaited her husband's return just so she could feel validated. I saw my daughter and son brought some light into my life when they were born. Their births were 2 years apart, but they play like twins. I love them with every single vein in me. They stopped my emotional problems for a while, but even that was temporary. When they were old enough to go to school, my loneliness came back. I would dwell in my sad thoughts for hours before they returned. What I struggled most with was understanding what love meant. I grew up without love, so I could never really understand what it was or recognize when I was at the receiving end of it. For a long time, I thought my husband loved me and I loved him too, but one day I realized that all we had was an understanding. And understand that we were stuck together for life. So we better not make each other's life difficult. That was when I made my decision. I took the first independent step of my whole life 2 years ago when my husband came back from work, and I told him I wanted to start going to college. He was surprised at my request and did not even take me seriously until I told him the same thing 2 days later. At first, he tried to talk me out of it and talk about how the children needed me, but I told him the children had school and extra lessons. He told me that he earned enough to take us a lifetime, so I should not bother getting into college. He insisted that college was important for me, and it was not about getting a career to make money. After a lot of deliberation and a series of phone calls, yes, he called my parents and his parents to ask for permission. I was finally allowed to start college. When I started college, a part of me felt light and happy. I was already 30 then, but I did not care. I now had something to look forward to every day. I made new friends and learned to laugh a little. College felt like a place to spread my wings and fly as high as I wanted. One day after classes, a guy named Freed, 1828, offered to give me a lift. I politely declined because I already had a car that was designated to drive me home, but Fred was not ready to take no for an answer. He got out of his car and practically begged me to let him give me a ride. I found the situation funny and ridiculous, so I declined once again and left in my designated car. From that day, Fred kept offering me a ride home. At some point, after 2 weeks, I sent my car back and gave in. Feed was so happy. There had been a huge smile on his face. We chatted during the ride home and honestly felt nice to meet someone new. Fred drove me home the weeks that followed after that. It was not a problem because Vikram was not usually home till 9 p.m. in the night. I closed from college at 5 p.m. Fred and I became friends after 1 month of getting to know each other. It felt nice to have a friend, someone to talk to, and someone who actually wanted to know you without a reason behind it. I could tell that there was a physical attraction between us. But I tried to brush it off because I was still very married to Vikram. I really did. But for a woman who had been deprived of real love all her life, my resistance was not strong enough. One day, Fred and I kissed in this car. From that day on, we exchanged kisses in the car, from kisses to tight hugs, then smooching on day sex. The day it happened, I'd been so shocked that I did not move for a long time. Yes, it happened in his car. It was at that moment I realized I really didn't love my husband, because after it happened, I did not feel any form of regret or shame. I felt liberated and full. I liked it so much I was not afraid to do it again. Fine. It's not something I'm ashamed of saying because I deserve to be happy. I deserve to live a content life. Fred and I continued our secret relationship for 1 more year. I told him I was married long before we got intimate, but he didn't really care. He was okay with the secret moments we shared. Begin to smile more and live life more purposefully thanks to Fred, but one day it all broke into pieces. On this fateful day, my designated driver came to pick me up. It was an unusual occurrence because I had asked him to stop coming since I usually went home with Fred. The driver insisted and told me he had to drive me home that day. Fred had invited me to his house, so I did not want to disappoint him. I refused to follow my driver and went to Fred's house. My husband was on a business trip and my kids were at Vikram's sister's place, so I did not plan on going back home. Fred cooked dinner for both of us, lit candles, and played some very nice music. It felt like I was in a dream, and to be honest, I didn't really want to wake up. I felt genuinely happy after a long time. I liked the feeling of content I had in that moment. I shared with Fred. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but everything that happened to me in my life had been wrong. I wanted to be selfish for once in my life. I wanted to choose myself, and I did just that. I had a passionate night with a man that was not my husband. The next morning, I woke up in Fred's t-shirt. I was thirsty and went to grab some water to drink from the kitchen. I remember hearing a knock on the door. And when I opened the door, I was shocked to see Vikram standing there. He looked like he could kill me at that moment. I was too shocked to move or say a word. I could see the anger in his eyes that day. The way he glared at me and pushed me out of the way. Fred ran downstairs to see what was happening, and that was when he met Vikram. Vikram punched Fred till he was bleeding. I had been so scared that I started to scream. I got the shock of my life when I saw my designated driver at the door with 2 policemen. That was when everything seemed to make sense. I realized that Vikram must have noticed that I no longer used my designated driver, so started to keep an eye on me. He lied that he was going on a business trip. He just wanted to follow me and catch me red-handed. The driver had followed Fred's car the night before and told Vikram the address. It was a trap. Vikram found out I was cheating on him, so he set a trap for me and Fred. Vikram always wanted to be in control no matter what. I cheated and got out of his control, so he wanted to catch me in the act his own way. I thought that was all, but Vikram had me and Fred arrested. I know some of you might wonder who gets arrested for cheating. Well, Fred and I got arrested, but it was not for cheating. The police found drugs in Fred's garden and in his car, so we were arrested for the illegal possession of drugs. Of course, it was all framed by Vikram. Fred had a heart condition and could not even smoke. How did drugs suddenly appears? And then Vikram was right there to notice it. Our explanations fell on deaf ears and we were detained for 3 days. It was Fred's friend that got us out on bail. That was 2 months ago. Vikram sent me packing and I was served with divorce papers immediately. The only thing I'm worried about now is my children. They mean a lot to me. I don't want Vikram to get full custody in court. What should I do? Should I beg him to take me back for the sake of my children? Please help me. Update. So it's been a year and I decided to add an update since a lot of people read my story. Fred and I are still together. I live with him. I'm still in college trying to finish up and get a job. Fred has been helpful, and he's been taking good care of me. Vikram tried his best to get full custody of our children. He even used his wealth, but the court concluded that the children needed me in their lives. We now co-parent cordially and try to maintain a civil relationship for our children. My parents called me just to disown me over the phone when they found out what happened, but I didn't really care. They were never really loving parents to begin with. The first few months after getting caught were horrible, but I took each day seriously and fought my way out. My life is not perfect, but at least for the first time in my whole existence, I chose myself. That's all that matters to me. I now understand what care and love means. I'd rather live a fulfilled life with nothing than an empty one with everything. I lost my wealthy husband, but I got my peace and happiness, which is priceless. I hope my journey to freedom inspires someone else. The journey ends here, guys. Goodbye.